My name is Sofia Akram, and I am the Library and Archives Assistant at Wandsworth Heritage Service. Today is Friday, the 9th of April 2021. I'm speaking with Beryl and her amanuensis through an online video communications software platform called Zoom. I am here in the search room of Wandsworth Heritage Service, which is based on the first floor of Battersea Library. Can you tell me your full name?
My full name is Beryl. Can you hear it? Yep.
Oh,
full name, Beryl Alma Kingston. And I was born on the 28th of January, 1931. Okay.
And can you tell me where you are today?
Today, I'm in my study in Aldwick, which is near Bognor Regis.
Perfect. And I guess I just wanted to start off by asking you if you can tell me where you were born.
Oh, Longley Road in Tooting. 49 Longley Road. Lovely house. That's where I was born.
And can you tell me what your earliest memories of Tooting are?
Sorry, my
earliest memories of Tooting?
Oh, heavens. Probably going down to the market with either my grandmother or a relation, which are very complicated, but I loved her to bits. They're called Dardy. She used to take me shopping in the market. And I loved the market. Oh, it was so full of smells, you see. And I was like a little dog. I could smell toffee apples at about 60 paces. It was lovely. Always had a toffee apple. And I liked the way they yelled out and how they talked to one another. And it was fun. Loved the market. Yes.
Actually, that's
the earliest I would think. And that was on the day that my sister was born. So I must have been about 5. That was around Christmas time when I went to the market.
I was actually going to ask you about one of your books and whether or not it was quite an autobiographical book, which is A Family at War, which I started reading yesterday, which starts off very similar to what you've described.
Yep. That A Family at War is autobiographical. It's the only one of mine that is. And I haven't given it to a publisher because I thought, oh my God, it's a bit tough. I was a beaten child. So it was not a happy childhood at all. Yeah, until I met my darling. And all that's in the book too. It ends on a happy note with us getting married, which was a great day.
Did that take place in Tooting?
Yep, it did. Actually, not in the church. It took place in Wandsworth Registry Office. And we couldn't have a big reception because we didn't have any money. But we had a few family that decided they were going to be there at Longley Road. And so I've got pictures of the 1 or 2 guests and me and my old darling out in the garden, which was a beautiful garden. Very, very big. The original owner used to play croquet on the lawn. It was that size lawn. Beautiful trees down the bottom. Apple. Part of an orchard originally, part of the farm orchard, way back before they were built. Great stuff. Nice place to live. And it had a library, which was the pleasure of my life. It had a whole room upstairs devoted to books. And I was the only person in the family that read. And I gobbled them up. I loved them. I read all sorts of things, very unsuitable, some of them. I'm sure if a child were to read some of the things I was reading then, they'd be told, no, not yet. Wait till you're a bit older. But it didn't worry me at all. I just gobbled. Lots and lots and lots. Children's books too, of course. Children's books like Alice in Wonderland and with the Water Babies. And years afterwards, when I was in a school in Catford, I wrote with the music master. We wrote a musical on the Water Babies. I provided the lyrics and the libretto, and he wrote the music. It was lovely. We did have fun with that. I was the wrong kind of teacher, though, definitely the wrong kind. We had fun in the lesson, you see. We mucked about. I didn't care. I thought, well, you only live once, and I might not live all that long. I thought I was a goner when I was 9. That was when the bomb fell. That's in the book, because people were saying, what was it like during the war? And I thought, well, not like people remember now. They say, oh, we were all this and we were all that. And no, we weren't. We were just ordinary, getting on with the job we did. I kept a diary from the time I was 7, daily diary. So I've got a lot of stuff that was recorded.
Yeah.
That's very useful, because if I thought, oh, I must have done, and I'd look it up in the diary. And one I found, I put Hiroshima in the, I think the autobiography. Anyhow, one of the war books, The Coming of the Atom Bomb. And I thought, I would have been horrified by that at the time. And so I went to the diary and I looked it up, and I was horrified by what I found, because I'd written, they've dropped a big bomb on a town in Japan, and they've killed everybody in it. Good thing, serve them right. I said that. You see, yeah, pretty awful, wasn't it? But it was a general opinion. They were dreadful people, you see. We learned that they were dreadful people.
Yes.
It wasn't until you started meeting a few of them and thinking how gentle and lovely they were that you changed that one.
Yeah.
I'm all for travel. Where else do you want to go?
Well, I know that you touched a bit about your family life, and I know that you mentioned obviously that you didn't have a very good childhood. So I hope it's okay just to talk a bit about what your family life, your early family life was like in Tooting. You mentioned your sister. I don't know if you have any other siblings or what your home life was like.
Adopted sister, loved to bits. She's my sweetie. She was adopted when I was 11, when we were evacuated for the second time. We were in Harpenden, and she was my baby. I fed her bottles and bathed her. Gran and I looked after her, and oh, she was lovely. So that sister's gorgeous. The other one was very difficult, spoilt brat. So it was hard to make contact with her. And the mother-father business were tricky, shall we say. My mother caned me whenever she needed to. It wasn't because of what I was doing. I always thought it was when I was tiny. I thought, well, I must be better behaved. What have I done wrong? What have I done wrong? But it wasn't. It was because she really desperately needed to get rid of some very ugly, angry emotions in her. Yeah. And she was full of anger and hatred, and she picked the cane up and knocked me sideways with it, beat me sideways most of the time. So it wasn't easy.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what was your home like? Your grandmother, sorry, you said?
My grandmother was lovely.
Yes, and you lived...
She lived, it was her house. We lived in her house. She owned the house in Longley Road, and she was a dear, but very frightened of my mother, so she couldn't help me a lot. I used to walk in my sleep, and I'd go into, obviously not my mother's bedroom, good God, but into my grandmother's bedroom, fast asleep, and get in the bed with her. And she used to cuddle me. It was a nice bed. It had a goose feather mattress, so you sunk into it, snuggle. And she used to wake me up very early in the morning and say, come on, Beryl dear, you must go back to your bed now, because they'll find you've come in here. We won't say anything. And so I used to give her a cuddle and go down to bed again. But that, I think, showed a lot of what the relationships were in the house. pretty monstrous. But a library and a grandma and a baby sister. It wasn't all bad. And I still see baby sister a lot whenever, well, not now because of the lockdowns, but whenever I can.
Yeah.
Very beautiful she is. Gorgeous girl. Really something. Very proud of her, you can tell. But we left Tooting, you see, before the war began. The big evacuation took place the day before, the day it was declared, and the day after. It took 3 days to get all the kids out of London that were prepared to go. Not all did. And we went on this train from Victoria, which was quite something, full of kids singing rude songs, I might say, not frightened in the least. People could say, oh, poor little things, they must have been terrified. They weren't. There was a song about Hitler, which we sang a lot. It was very rude. Hitler has only got one ball. Somebody else has 2, but rather small. Himmler has something similar. And Goebbels, because we never called him Goebbels, we didn't know how to pronounce it. We called him Goebbels. Goebbels has no balls at all. I'm afraid. So yes, we also took our gas masks to bits, because if you took off the bottom and you took all the bits out that were going to keep you safe when you got gassed, and you put them on the train seat or somewhere, and then you put it back on again, the top, you could suck things off surfaces like the train seat or somebody's lap and play elephant. Lovely. Not what you should really do. So you see, it wasn't quite how people see it. We didn't see ourselves as terribly put upon when we went up. It was quite a laugh going away too.
Yeah.
And I came here, you see, to Feltham. So this was a nice place to come. And went to the village school. Oh, instead of a convent. I'd been to a convent before, which was quite hard work. But the village school was a hoot. That was lovely. I went to 10 different schools as a child because of the wandering. So I didn't end up with a school I should have gone to at 11 until I was 14, I think. Came back to London to go there, to be at the school. Lovely school. Yeah. It was called Streatham Secondary School in those days. Then it became Rosa Bassett. I've no idea what it is now. It's a comprehensive, joined up with a boys' school, so it's big, and it takes the grammar school building, and opposite there was a training college called Thursdown, and it took that as well. But in my day, it was just the building in Welham Road, and a completely different style of learning. Lovely.
Yes.
That was really nice. And I used that in a book about schools. I didn't say it was Streatham, I put it in Fulham or somewhere like that, but it was that school. And that particular head, who was, well, super, absolutely lovely. The technique was, you see, you didn't make kids sit in rows and learn non-stop all day long. In other words, be barked at and told what to do and what to think. No, not at all. You had one lesson per subject, and the rest of your time was your own. It was study time, and you always had an assignment set, so you had to do that. But you could, if you wanted to read more books than the one you were actually reading, great. There was a library at the back of the English room which had books in you could read. Or if you wanted to just go out in the garden, in the on the grounds, if they weren't playing some game there, and roll about in the sun and talk to your friends, quite all right, providing you got your work done. I was quite quick. I got my work done quite quickly, which meant I could read all sorts of other things. So I fell in love with Hardy and read all his novels, and Blake. found Blake at that school. Oh, that was something. And the headmistress, if you were in trouble, if you didn't do your assignments as you were supposed to, or got in a fight or whatever it was, she would have what were called a PL, a private lesson. You had to go and see Miss Davis for a private lesson. And I thought the first time they sent me for a private lesson, the head wants to see you, you go, she wants to give you a private lesson. What have I done? Because heads usually caned you and told you off. This one didn't. She had a fire in the room and she sat you down in front of it and she said, what's the problem? Why did you, whatever it was, let's find out what's wrong. And then we deal with it. In my case, it was not long after I'd arrived and I'd just done a whole set of exams. One was chemistry and I didn't know anything about chemistry. So I just drew all the chemical equipment I could think of, all the scientific gadgets and things, and made a big and wrote, and oxygen comes out here. And she laughed. She took it out and she said, plainly, you haven't learned any chemistry at all, have you? Oh, she said, well, we'll have to put that right. You're going to university, of course, aren't you? First time anyone had said that to me, I thought, God, am I? And I think said, am I? And she said, oh, yes, most certainly you are. And you'll have to learn Latin. All right. So I learnt Latin and went to King's. It was quite an eye-opener to think that I could do that. I didn't think I was that kind of person. But I turned out to be quite that kind of person. In amongst a lot of, most of the men at that time at college were not straight out of school. The women were, but the men had been demobbed. They were straight out the war. Some of them were quite a bit older than us. And they were funny. They were lovely to work with because they took no stick from anyone. But I liked being with them. I thought they were great. And of course, my darling was an ex-serviceman. He was 8 years older than me, and he'd come out the RAF. And he was a sweetheart, absolutely lovely. I found him on my doorstep. Can you imagine that? This is a true story. I always tell people, just say, liar, liar, pants on fire, because things like this don't happen. But it was the winter of 47. So cold you wouldn't believe. Mounds of snow in the streets. No coal much, because the lorries couldn't get through, the trains couldn't get through, the points were frozen. So it was bloody cold. And he was still in the RAF waiting to be demobbed. And he was sent home, the whole group were sent home because it was so cold, they couldn't get the lorries up the hill with their supplies, so they sent them all home. He came home and I was running a dance group in the drawing room of the house to keep us warm, kids warm. My sister and her friends and my friends, and jumped about, Dashing White Sergeant and all sorts of stupid things like that. We loved it. Bang, bang, bang. And he was sent to pick her up. This was his sister. And he came in to pick her up, knocked on the door. Nobody took any notice. So I went and answered it, and there he was, mine. I used to say to him after, I found you on the doorstep with a ribbon round your neck saying, for you. And he'd say, yeah. And that was it. Sweetie he was.
Did he grow up in Tooting as well?
He was teaching, yes. Eventually, yes. He was Tooting. He lived in Blackshaw Road, just down the road, literally from us. There's no distance at all. So that was a start. Yeah. Good start. They say love at first sight doesn't happen. Boom, boom. We talked. His sister said, if you're going to talk, I'm going home. He'll go on forever, she said to me. He'll talk and talk. I'm going home. So she went giggling off with all the rest of her friends. Giggle, 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 down the road, gone. And then we talked. We talked politics, we talked about Blake, we talked, oh, you name it, we talked about it, went on, and finally he left. And I thought, I wonder whether I'll see him again. I wonder how soon. And it was Saturday. He came back with a book. He thought I might like to read. Yes. That's not a bad story, is it?
It's lovely.
Yeah. I can say without doubt at all, that changed my life, being with him. And he was adored by our children. My God, they just doted on him. Quite right, too. Him very eccentric and very loving. So, yes.
Yeah.
And we lost him 16 years ago or something ghastly like that. It's been horrid without him. Very difficult. But you make friends. I come to Tooting now and then. It's lovely. I can smell the old smells and hear the old words and hear the language again. It's lovely. It's nice to hear talk that is Tooting, straight Tooting. When I went to the library there, they said, what could I remember of, did I ever play out? Well, technically I wasn't supposed to, but I used to come the long way round home from the convent and play out in the streets at the back of Longley Road with all sorts of people I got to know there, which was nice, and come back and say, I had to help the teacher, I'm a bit late. Lies. But they were saying at the library, did you ever have a grotter? Do you know what a grotter is? Oh, it's
I don't know.
Grotter. You made a grotter. You went a little gang of you and you set up a cloth or a white doily or something that you could lift up outside the underground station, right by the exits, people saw, and you put bits of coloured glass and flowers and anything pretty on it, and you made it into a grotto, which of course being Tooting, we called a grotto. And we used to yell out to people coming out the underground, penny for the grotto, penny for the grotto. It's better than the guy. Similar, of course. I like the kids within Tooting, they were great. So there we were, sitting in the library, remember the grotto, and chuck out your mouldies. Did you go on Derby Day? Derby Day, all the toffs used to come back along the high road in their cars, and we'd stand on the curb and we'd yell at them, chuck out your mouldies. And if they'd had a win, they put their hands in their pockets and took out the loose change and threw it in the air for us. So there was a bit more money there, actually. Wasn't supposed to do that. My mother said, you do not do that. That's very common. Yeah. I must have been very common. And Gran said, yeah, go down, but we won't tell her. Just nip off and go down. So I nipped off and went down and chucked out my mouldies and all that.
I found the use of language in your books, especially your first book, which I was reading yesterday actually, about Tooting speak, really interesting. So you mentioned some parts of, Tooting speak or Tooting phrases. I don't know if you can think of any more, perhaps maybe that isn't really used anymore, or a way of speaking that Tooting.
I think that was very early Tooting, and kids have their own vocabulary anyway, so we had lots of words we used, and my grandmother gave me the words of her childhood. She used to say, if you were sitting and your skirt had ridden up and she could see your knickers, because you couldn't, no, so she'd say, cover your whereabouts, dear, just cover your whereabouts. And I thought that was rather nice too. And she didn't go to the lavatory. She used to say, I must just go and see Aunt Jane. She toddled off. It was her going to see Aunt Jane that put me in completely the wrong place when the bomb actually fell down our road. We had a stick. We spent the night in the cellar because it was the safest place in the house. The house could have fallen on us, and providing they could dig us out, we'd have been all right. But you had lulls in a raid. It started at dark and it went on till dawn. And there were times in the raid when you didn't have bombs overhead. You knew if there were because you could hear them. And the ack-ack had died down a bit and it was calmer. And Gran said, oh, I must just go on to go and see Aunt Jane. And I said, oh, I want to see Aunt Jane too. So we both toddled up together up the stairs. And she went to, there were 2 toilets in a house with 19 rooms. Can you imagine that? She went in the one that was attached to the kitchen downstairs, and I went halfway upstairs, the first flight of stairs, and I went up to the loo there. When I was sitting on the loo, thinking, yes, I've done now, the bombers came over. I could hear them. And so I got up fairly quick and pulled my whereabouts to rights and went downstairs because I thought I'd better get back in the cellar. Otherwise, my mum would have had something to say. But the bomb fell as I was coming downstairs and it was 2 doors up. And nobody believes this, but this is true. I got to the hall and the ground I was standing on, the carpet, was like a wave. It rocked. I could feel it sort of, it was the shock wave, of course. And after that, the place was full of ceiling falling down and terrible noise and terrible lot of dust. I was just petrified. I stood there, I didn't do anything. I found I'm not one of these flight, I just freeze. And Gran and my mother appeared one on either side of me and joggled me down to the cellar. And the next morning, the warden came round to see what the damage was and how we were and all that. He'd been on duty all night, but he came round to see what the state was, and he came and looked and he said, I'm sorry, this is uninhabitable. Would you like me to arrange another evacuation for you because you can't live here? It was a bit of a mess. And my mother said, no, leave it to me. I will do that. So she disappeared. She shot off after breakfast. And she came back saying, it's all fixed. We're going tomorrow. Let's start packing. And so we packed. We had another night in the cellar. And the next morning, a black limo arrived with a chauffeur in it. And we went to Harpenden in this black limo. It belonged to, I don't know whether this name will mean anything to you at all. Flanagan and Allen, do you remember them? No, they used to sing. Oh, do you think you are kidding, Mr. Riddler, if you think old England's done? Dad's Army? Well, that was Flanagan. And Allen had a brother who kept the shop and lived in Tooting next to my grandfather's shop, which was at the Church Lane end. And he'd got a little girl, and their house was in a mess, and he wanted his daughter to come with us. And so she was the price. We took her. And it was Chesney Allen's car that we went in. My God, we've never been this grand. I thought I ought to do this. Very grand. So that was us evacuated for the same time with bunting. Nothing was quite the same as people paint it, because we did laugh a hell of a lot sometimes. Or maybe that's the way you cope with horror. I don't know. Anyway, that was it.
And then when you returned to Tooting after you were evacuated the second time, Was it as you remembered?
Was it?
As you remembered Tooting, was it the same as you remembered?
No, battered. Oh, lots of bomb sites. Terrible mess. Terrible mess. And then the buzz bombs were coming. They were horrible things. They really were, because you could see them. You saw them coming, black. And one of my relations, the ruder ones, said, bloody things fart in fire. And they did. They were shooting fire out the back one end. And then they'd stop, glonk. The engine would go. And you had 13 seconds before they hit the ground. So you had to get under cover fairly quick. But they went on for quite some time while I was at school. But the school was so nice, it was worth buzz bombs to be with them. And then we had the rockets, of course, after that. And they were murderous things because you couldn't hear them coming or see them. They were so quick. In fact, you heard the explosion. And then after the explosion, you heard, which was the noise of the thing coming. It caught up, the noise caught up with it. Weird and terrible destruction. My God. If it fell in the middle of a road, like two with four corners, it would destroy everything on either side. Wow. And it came down all day long and all night long. You never knew when it was going to come. They were terrifying things. But everybody said, so what the hell can you do about it? Nothing at all. The first one that fell, they put about in the newspaper that it was a gas explosion. And then there was another one. People were saying all around the market and in Tooting, gas explosion? That's never another gas explosion. This is some sort of bomb. They were canny. And then, of course, eventually they had to say what they were. And they were old. Yeah. I'll tell you something else. During the Blitz and during that time, because we came back from Feltham, because my mother said there wasn't going to be a war, we were going to make it up with Hitler, because he was a very nice man. And he was going to attack the Russians, which he did, actually, but we didn't make it up with him. So we came home. That's how we hit the Blitz. We came home just in time for the start of the Blitz. And one of the things that I noticed very much was that if I went on a tram anywhere, the tram conductor would come round and say, God, enough, a dreadful night in Balham last night, or blimey, you should see what they've done in, and tell you what was going on. So the newspapers would hide it a bit, but the trams took the news all over the place. We heard about the tram went through into the underground at Balham. No, bus, that was. And how people were killed there. They drowned and were gassed. And oh, God, dreadful. Absolutely dreadful. So you didn't have anything hidden from you because people talked.
People talked, yeah.
Yeah, oh, yeah. They told one another in very, very interesting language. I learned to swear splendidly when I was young because their swearing was so good. Hells, bells, and buckets of blood, my father would say when something went wrong. That's a nice swear word to come out with when you're really cross. An odd childhood, I think you could say.
Actually, it's interesting that you mentioned the trams because obviously they don't exist anymore in Tooting. But I just wondered what it was like with the sounds in Tooting when you were growing up. You've got the trams, you had the underground, you talked about the market and people would talk a lot. And I just wondered about the sounds, if you can describe any.
I don't think I can. I could tell you the smells everywhere I went.
Oh, the smells. Yeah, that would be. That's also I'm very, very interested.
Yeah, the king's statue was originally on a little island in the middle of the road, and either side there were lavatories. which stunk to high heaven. My God, they were wrong. If the wind was in the wrong, and I always used to say to Daddy or my grandmother when we were going off shopping, it's a funny place to put the king. And why is he dressed up like that? Is he going in a pantomime? And my Daddy, the one I was most fond of, said, well, it's useful for him in case he ever gets taken short. So I used to ask this king and think, if you get taken short, you can nip off down the public lavatory. And then they moved him. It was his ceremonial robes, of course, that I was thinking was a pantomime. But
And if you if you can describe the smells of the market, because obviously you said you used to go around sniffing everything.
Yes, lovely. Fish, you could smell the fish stall a long way off, and you could almost distinguish which fish was there. They had a salmon once, a huge salmon, right in the middle. Ooh, and that smelled quite different to the other fish. There was what was they called? Mizens, who sold salads, and you could smell the earth on them. And all the different smells of things as they cut them. And Eggy the Eggman, he was fun. He was right on the entrance to where the buses were, Longmead, going into the market, the back of the market.
Yeah.
And he had a stall, and he sold eggs and bacon. And you could smell the bacon as you came in. And he was very well named because he looked like an egg. He wore brown Holland overalls, and his little bald head came out the top with no hair on it, just a little fringe. And he'd call out, bacon egg, bacon egg, bacon egg. Rather nice, like a little chicken going. I liked him. Didn't buy a bacon egg from me though. And then we went further and deeper into the, and in the middle, a bit further down from the entrance, there was a place where they sold cloth and cottons and wool, and you could smell that strong, lovely cottons. If I wasn't being watched, I would, because I was not very tall at that stage, lean in and smell the cottons in rolls. Yeah, they were nice. So yes, lots. And of course the stall with the toffee apples, which I was forbidden. So I used to have them, and then we'd come home on the tram, and either my gran or Daddy would take out a hanky. And they said, come on, let's clean you up. Rub your little face because we don't want to know. I'd get my face rubbed with this handkerchief, and then I would be clean. So that was all the smells. Oh, and of course, lots of smells in the convent, because the convent smelled of incense, and the father smelled horrible, like an old flannel. He was very odd. You had to tell him what sins you'd committed, which was very difficult when you're 7. You have to go and say, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. Well, I could do that bit. And then he'd say, in what way have you sinned, my child? And you would think, what am I going to say now? I didn't do what my mummy told me. Do what your mother tells you. One Hail Mary. I can still say my Hail Mary. And shoes, you could smell, because we used to take our shoes off and wear sort of plimsolly shoes around. And in the break, if the sister who was teaching us was happy about it, she used to take us all out in the garden at the back of the convent, and we went on very sedate walks. We didn't play, but we went from statue to statue, because there were little statues in niches all the way around the garden, and we stood in a group and said prayers to the statue. Hail Mary again. Yeah. Which I also learnt to say in Latin, because they did a whole. I didn't learn the Latin, but I learned the what you had to say. Ave Maria, Gracia Plena, all that. Don't know why. But that was in the chapel. And when we had a day raid, and at the start of the bits it was day raids, we went into the chapel, and the father would be swinging the incense, and they used to say, you'll be perfectly all right in the chapel because the baby Jesus will look after you. And I quite believed that and thought we were going to be perfectly all right. But years after, I thought, that had a damn great window in it. With no cover over it at all. If there'd been a bomb in the grounds, we'd have been cut to shreds. But we went down because the baby Jesus was very good and did look after us. You learn some very weird things at school. Not always what the teachers think you're learning.
Would you consider Tooting home to you still?
Yes, very important to me. Yes,
Yeah.
it's where my roots are. If you go back to a place you've lived in, and although I was unhappy in the house with my mother, everywhere else was okay. And I had Dardy, who lived in the off-licence, in the flat above the off-licence, and my gran. And so it was a good place to be. Yeah, I liked it. It suited me. It was rude in the same way, if you can imagine such a thing, because of course I couldn't be rude.
And then do you find that Tooting is a place that you return to potentially, you know, professionally in your writing? Because I know that you've got more than one book that's set in Tooting, or say if I say, you know, spiritually, is that something that you feel?
I feel I belong there. I have belonged in other places too, but I feel roots, I think that's what it is. That's where my roots are. I get out the tube, I know exactly where I am. I know where I want to go and see. I know who I want to visit, and so on. It's lovely.
Yeah.
And one of my she was an agent, publicity agent, in one of the many publishers I've had, has a house there in Tooting. So I've got another link, a publishing link with Tooting, which is nice. And she lives pretty well just opposite where my husband used to live as a child in Blackshaw Road. Yes, it's a small world, Tooting, you see. And it's colourful. That's the other thing. When I went back, and I hadn't been there for a long while when I went back, in my day there were Italians, Germans, Jews. Mr. Young lived 2 doors up from us, and Mr. Young kept the bakery at the Broadway. It was a sweetie, lovely family. And so there were lots of immigrants. There'd been an influx of immigrants in the 80s and 90s, and there they were. And when I come back, lots of immigrants, all bringing something else. And I think, well, damn me, nothing's changed. It's just slightly different people, which is nice. Yeah. And a lot of old people who remember it as I do.
And I guess what I thought was also, I was just going to say about whether or not you think Tooting is unique. I know that in some of your other books you do mention other parts of London, also other, you know, towns in South London especially, but do you think Tooting is unique compared to other places in London?
It was a village originally. It still has the ethos of a village, even though it's huge. But if you go to Streatham, that's a slightly different ethos. I think we've got to stop now, haven't we?
Yes, we do.
It's 11:38. Yower. Yes, we must say goodbye.
It's been lovely to speak with you. I should actually say that I went to Graveney School on Welham Road. So I think that's the same school that you were taught at as well, which is an amazing connection. And I think that there's so many more questions I would love to ask you, but I know that we should stop it here. But I just have one very, very short question, which is, we talked about love a lot and obviously different people and, you know, I think Tooting's such a welcoming place, and I know that you described that in your first book as somewhere that is really, you know, where, like, you know, Tooting is a place where, you know, rich and poor mix, and people from all different cultures and communities have all mixed together. Unlike, I know that you mentioned Clapham in your first book, and Clapham wasn't really like that, but for you, Tooting was. And would you say that you're in love with Tooting potentially, or that you'll always love
Yes,
Tooting?
of course. Yes, of course. As you are with anything where your roots go deep, you'll go back and you think, I'm home. Here I am, I'm home. And that's a nice feeling.